Okay, so get this. Today, we are diving into Ray Dalio's principles, life and work.
Oh,
This
let
book, I'm telling you, it's a
so
monster.
it's a big one.
But lucky for you, we are here to break it all down
Yeah.
into like the most important stuff, the stuff you can actually use, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. What I find really fascinating about Dalio is just like his whole approach is so systematic.
Right.
Like he's coming at it like a scientist almost. Like,
Yeah.
how do you reverse engineer success?
Totally. And it's not just some guy like theorizing in a basement. This is a guy who built Bridgewater. I mean, he's
Sure.
one of the biggest hedge funds, made billions. And like he called the 2008 housing crisis when
Right.
everybody else was like, things are great.
Exactly. Yeah, he's got a track record.
Yeah. So we are tapping into that brain.
Absolutely. And for us, we're not saying that everything Dalio says is, the word of God or anything like that.
Right.
We're going to pick out the pieces that really resonate.
Right. Like we always do. So
Yeah.
he's got this thing. It's like a big one for him,
Yeah.
hyperrealism. And he says, and this is a quote, truth, or more precisely, an accurate understanding of reality is the essential foundation for any good outcome.
And that's really, I think, the core of it. It's not just about accepting hard truths.
Yeah.
It's being able to look at reality, even when it's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
even when it's painful,
Yeah.
and figure out how it really works.
And he doesn't shy away from it. Like he talks about this, he tells the story of how he totally miscalculated back in like 82 in the stock market and like
Yeah.
had predicted a crash that didn't happen.
Yeah, yeah. He fully admits, like, I should have seen the signs. This was a classic case of history rhyming.
Right.
Like it was another one of those cycles and I missed it.
Right.
And that was actually a turning point for him
Wow.
because that's what pushed him to really study history and try to understand these patterns.
It's like you always want things to go a certain way, but reality has other plans.
Exactly.
So he's like, okay, how do you get to this hyperrealism? How do you actually make decisions based on how things are?
Yeah.
And this is where it gets even, I think, more intense, more interesting.
Yeah.
He's all about this radical open-mindedness and transparency, like those two things.
And for him, that's the key to learning because he's all about, like, how do you create systems that learn?
Right.
And to do that, you need constant feedback. You need data. And you need people to be completely honest, even when it's uncomfortable.
And this is where Bridgewater, his company, comes in. And it's kind of legendary, maybe some would say infamous,
Right.
this idea that they record everything.
Everything's recorded. Meetings, debates,
And everybody can see it.
all transparent. It's all there.
Yeah, like talk about intense.
Intense.
Right. But he says that is the only way to get past these like ego traps and our own blind spots, right?
Absolutely.
We all have them.
It's so easy to get caught in your own head.
Yes.
And Dalio, he's just like, nope, we're landed all out there.
Everybody's going to see it.
We're going to analyze it. We're going to learn from it. He says people rarely call themselves out on their own BS.
Right, exactly.
So you need a system that actually does that.
Yes.
That forces you to see those things.
Yeah. So how do we take this and actually like, I don't know, what do we do with this information?
Right. So this is where Dalio gets really practical.
Okay.
He's got this 5-step process that he uses for everything.
Okay.
He doesn't differentiate between like, your personal life and your work life. It's all the same.
Interesting.
And it starts with, step 1 is goals. And you might think, well, duh.
Yeah, of course. I've got goals.
Right. But he says most people are really bad at actually setting goals,
Okay.
like really defining what they want.
So it's not enough to say, I want to be successful and have a lot of money. Like you have to actually.
Right. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
What does that look like? When do you want it?
Okay.
Be specific and write it down.
Gotcha. So step 1, really get clear on your goals.
Exactly. And then step 2, this is classic Dalio, identify and do not tolerate problems.
So don't shy away from them.
No, he embraces problems.
Interesting.
Problems are, they're opportunities for improvement.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you've got to identify them. And then step 3, diagnose them.
Oh, okay. So you don't just like slap something on it.
Right. You don't just put a
Yeah.
Band-Aid on it. You got to figure out what's the root cause.
Like a good doctor.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've identified the goals, we found the problems, we figured out what's causing them. Then what?
Then you design a solution.
Okay.
And he approaches this like an engineer.
Tell me about that.
Well, he's all about building systems.
Right.
And he says, think about like building machine. Everything has to work together.
Oh.
Every part has to fit.
Gotcha.
And then finally, step 5.
Okay, what's the last one?
Push through to completion.
Ah, so it's not enough to have the plan.
No, you got to do it.
Right, yeah, you got to execute.
He's all about execution. He says you could have the best plan in the world, but if you don't actually do it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have we heard that?
Right. It's all about execution.
And what's great about the book, he actually gives examples of how he's used this for like investment decisions and also like managing teams and all these things.
Exactly. He connects it back to real life, which is really helpful.
Yeah, so he's got this whole system for building like great teams.
Yes, absolutely.
And that actually reminds me, this is another thing that I think is so interesting about Dalio.
Yeah.
His approach to finding the right people. Like,
Oh, yeah. He's got very specific ideas about that.
so tell me about that. Like, how does he go about finding the right people?
Well, he's a huge believer in personality tests.
Okay.
And I don't just mean like your basic Myers-Briggs.
Right.
He goes way deeper.
Okay.
Like at Bridgewater, they have these things called baseball cards for all the employees.
Baseball cards.
Yeah, basically.
What's on a baseball card for an employee?
So they put, all their strengths, their weaknesses, how they handle pressure, how they make decisions, their communication style, like all of it.
So it's like a scouting report.
Kind of. Yeah, exactly.
For their
For their
thing.
personality.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And then what? So everybody walks around with their baseball card?
Well, it's more like it's a tool for management, right?
Yeah.
So it helps them put people in the right roles,
Oh, interesting.
Because Dalio believes that mismatches, like when you put someone in a role that they're just not suited for, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So the baseball cards help them avoid that.
So it's like, you might be amazing at this one thing,
Right.
but if you're in the wrong spot,
You're going to fail.
it's not going to work.
Exactly.
Interesting, because it all seems very, I don't know, like systematized.
Yeah.
Does he leave any room for creativity for like, people to do their own thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. He would say that, these aren't like hard and fast rules.
Right.
It's more like guidelines, principles.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a framework,
Yeah.
and you have to adapt it to your own situation.
So it's more like he's giving you the tool.
Exactly.
Okay.
The tool,
You got to build your own house.
you still got to build the house.
That makes sense.
Uh.
It's like he's not saying follow my path. He's saying here are some principles that have worked for me.
Right.
You can use them to figure out your own way.
Exactly.
That's cool. It all requires a lot of self-awareness, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you got to know what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you like, what you don't like.
And Dalio talks a lot about that, like really understanding your values,
Okay.
your passions, what you want out of life.
Yeah.
Because he believes that if you're not aligned with your work, you're going to be miserable.
Yeah, life's too short. Right.
Exactly.
To be stuck in a job you hate.
So he says you've got two options. You can either change your situation
Okay.
or you can change your attitude.
Oh, okay. So if you don't like your job, you can either quit and find a new one,
Right.
or you can find a way to like the one you have.
Exactly.
Easier said than done sometimes.
It definitely can be.
Right.
But, sometimes you can't just up and quit your job.
Right.
So Dalio says find ways to make it meaningful.
Okay, I like that.
Find ways to contribute.
Find the good parts.
Right. Even if it's not your dream job.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here
We had
about Dalio's
a
principle.
lot of wisdom in there.
The hyperrealism, the 5 steps,
Baseball cards,
the baseball cards, right.
very important.
But I think if I had to sum it up,
Yeah,
it's all about this idea that, reality is what it is.
it is.
And you have to learn to work with it,
Be a student.
not against it.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
So be open, be willing to learn, be willing to change.
And keep growing.
Keep growing. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of Ray Dalio. For all of you listening, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to share your thoughts, your insights, anything that resonated with you. Use the hashtag Deep Dive Principles. And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.